In today's show, we're live here on YouTube answering your questions. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, and TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Here to answer your questions. Fantasy playoffs are in the midst. They're coming up. The season's coming to a close. So we're going to answer your questions, and I am joined, of course, by the one and only Zak Hanshew. Zak, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good to be back, man. How are you?
I am good. It's good to have you here. We've got questions from people that are lining up here in the chat. So we'll get straight into it. All right, what is the first question? We've got Mike McLean says, Josh, I've got Vassell coming back tonight. My two worst players are Herder and Horford. Who would you drop to insert Vassell back into the lineup, Zak?
Ooh, that's a good question. Horford has been kind of up and down for a good bit of the season, but I still feel like he's been a bit steadier than a Kevin Herter, and especially with Malik Monk starting to come on recently. Actually, in this case, I prefer Horford. Curious to hear if you have a different take on that one.
No, I do as well. I just think what Herter brings, what he's not actually bringing at the moment, is so easily replaceable. Like I could add Tim Hardaway Jr., I could add Malik Beasley. Like I can get points and threes, and like you're right, he's getting his minutes cut. Like last game was a bit different. Fox was out, but he was playing like 21, 24, 26 minutes. Horford's coming on at the moment. It's just harder to find what Horford does, I think. I don't know if I'd be in a super rush to bring Vassell off IL as well. I think he's going to be pretty limited as he returns here. He might play 20 minutes a night for 2 weeks. I got no idea, but I'm not expecting him to be rushing out and playing 30 minutes here straight up. But yeah, I heard it would be the guy that I would move on from. Spud Surgeon says, if he wasn't already, LeBron is officially a drop. Yeah, I think that's true, Zach. We got the note today is going to be officially reevaluated in 3 weeks. So for the vast majority of us, that is reevaluated with 2 games to go in the fantasy championship week.
R.I.P.
Yep. See you later, LeBron. It's been great. What do you do like this? I guess moving on from LeBron, like, is there a clear replacement there? We've seen Troy Brown start in place of him. Austin Reeves has played really well. Look, it's not Rui Hachimura. Jared Vanderbilt's already got the value, but his value doesn't change with LeBron out, I don't think. So would you add Reeves? Would you consider Brown, who played well yesterday?
I would consider them. Out of anybody, I still think Malik Beasley probably has the best shot to have substantial value, moving forward for the rest of the season. But if he's not available, I think Reeves is probably the guy that you would add. I mean, you kind of are crossing your fingers that he runs into some hotties on the sideline and starts getting hot again. But
So Father Ismus, Austin Reeves.
Yeah, right. I mean, otherwise you're just kind of hoping and praying that somebody goes out there and does something. Yeah, it's not going to be pretty if you find yourself adding Austin Reeves.
No, look, he's been good the last 2 games, and he's worth a look. Like, he's shooting well, he's scoring okay, the assists are all right. It's okay. All right, it's not, but we still don't know what's going to happen when D'Angelo Russell returns. Will they just play Russell and Schroeder 30 minutes each together? I think that's possible. And then that limits Reeves and it limits Brown and limits all those guys. Or does one of those guys move to the bench? So still a lot up in the air, and I definitely wouldn't bother with Troy Brown or Hachimura. I'd look at Reeves and Beasley. If Beasley's going to do his thing, pretty much no matter what though, Zach, he's going to take a lot of shots. Some days they'll go in, some days they won't. Yeah. And you get very, very little else apart from that. What do you think about this one from Big Doggy? He says, is Josh Hart a hold in a 9-cat 10-10 league? And I guess on the surface, you look at that and go, of course he is. Like, the Knicks are flying, but he hasn't hit 30 minutes once yet, and we know he's a low scorer. Are you worried that the fact that him and Barrett and Grimes and Quickly all get in this like 22, starting with Grimes up to like 29 minutes, and no one pushes into those big minutes that we always look at Tibbs and go, he's going to play everyone 37 minutes. These guys are all getting limited.
I would worry about that. I mean, Josh Hart, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Knicks are undefeated since he's joined the rotation. I mean, he's been great, obviously. Had that viral moment when Jason Tatum got ejected. He's injected a lot of life into the team. He looks really good. But yeah, he's a guy that maybe is better on the court than he is for fantasy. And as you mentioned, a lot of these guys are going to have their minutes cannibalized by one another. So in a 10-team league, I don't know that he's necessarily a guy that you have to hold on to in a 10-team league. In a 12-team league and higher, absolutely you're holding on to him because he'll give you top 100 value, I think, is his floor. Pretty safely top 100, top 110 is the floor. But in a 10-team league, no, there's maybe better options.
Yeah, because you're talking in a 10-team league, you're in fantasy playoffs, you've only got to win 5 categories to win the week. And while we can say top 100, top 110 is right, like if you're in a situation where you desperately need scoring, he's not top 110, like he's worse than that. And you'll get better guys off the waiver wire. So it's never, especially at this time of the year, it's not always just about what is this guy ranked. Like, what does he do for you right now, this week against your opponent? That is what matters. Don't worry about what he's done a month ago. Don't worry about what the overall value in a vacuum tells you, because it doesn't actually mean anything if you lose the matchup and you go, well, but he was top 100 still. It doesn't matter if it doesn't have an impact on your team. And that brings me to this question from CJ Landgren. He says, is Bam a necessity to trade, only having 2 games in my playoff finals? I'm locked in as the 1 seed. Zach, we can talk about Bam as a individual player, but more as an esoteric, I don't even know if it's the right word here, concept about trading players who have 2 games in the playoffs. Like, is he a necessity to trade? Like, my immediate reaction is like, no, he's not. It's not great to have players with 2 games, but this season during the playoffs, there are a lot of teams that have 2-game weeks. Like, I think next week, there's like 5 or 6 teams that play 2 games. You can work around having a guy with 2 games. So is it worth it? I'll let you speak on it in a second, but is it worth it trading Bam, who we know, let's say top 40 is where we feel safe where Bam is. And when you trade him, so to trade him away knowing he's only got 2 games, you're probably going to get a worse player per game. You might get a top 60, a top 55 player. You might get that player. And that player might have 3 games. And then what if that player gets hurt one of those games? And then you're left with 2 games of the worst player. So we all look at these schedules and think, well, it's a guarantee that they will play those games. And that just isn't what happens. So I am usually pretty against making these moves to trade for worse players because of playoff schedule. I think there are significantly easier and better and more consistently positive ways to work around that than trading away players for worse guys.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think unless there's just a major trade-off here for Bam, you're going to take the 2 games of a guy that, as you mentioned, we feel pretty comfortable with, top 40 production. But he can give you second-round value in those 2 games. So are you really going to be trading that away for maybe 1 extra game of somebody that is slightly worse? And as you mentioned, can't guarantee that they'll stay healthy or that they'll be available. So no, I think you take the guaranteed production, the guaranteed elite production that you're going to get from Bam, unless this comes down to, a very small difference in player. And, for instance, somebody that's playing 5 games, then I would maybe consider it if it's like a 2 games versus 5 and the discrepancy is not too big. But 90% of the time, total agreement with everything you just said.
Look, if it's the player, it's pretty similar. Let's say it's Vooch, who's I think been about 45th over the last 2 weeks or something. He's had a little bit of a downturn, but let's say it's Vooch and he plays 4 games and Bam plays 2, and they're on a similar level per game. Sure, get the extra games in, but
absolutely.
Taking a significant step backwards to get a player with more games when that player might not get more games. And it's part of the reason why punting could be such a successful strategy in head-to-head leagues is that you get insulated against game deficiencies. So if you lose 3 to 4 games, you have built up so much strength in these other categories by concentrating your assets into those categories that if you are 2 to 3 games down, you're okay. You can actually deal with that, and that's one of the advantages of that. We've got a question from Jules, which we'll get to in a second. I'll put that up on the screen. You can have a think about it. But I'm going to tell you today that today's episode is brought to you by Nissan Ariya, in fact. Nissan's most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. And the most electric player of the week, it has to be Damian Lillard. 71 points. And he did it in regulation. Yes, it was against the Rockets, but you know what? They put up a fight, and the rest of the Blazers were terrible. And Lillard came out there, and he was brilliantly fierce. putting up tremendous numbers. First half, second half, stunningly powerful performance, exactly like the Nissan Ariya. Delivers on duality with a combination of fierceness and elegance. It is the perfect SUV crossover. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. The EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. All right, so the question is up on your screen, Zachary, from Jules, and he says, do you think Bobby Portis can still have value, let's say, in 1 to 2 weeks? Because the thing with Portis is since he come back from injury, he's been bad. And there are two ways to look at this. Is he bad because he is Bobby Portis? There's three ways. Is he bad because he's Bobby Portis? Is he bad because he's coming off a knee injury? Or is he bad because now he doesn't get every single backup power forward and center minutes because Chris Middleton's now playing? Also, Jay Crowder is playing, and they're giving more minutes to Joe Ingles. So Portis, who was getting by on 24, 25 minutes a night, is he just going to be stuck at 20 minutes a night from now on? And that doesn't make him a 12-team league guy. How do you see that rotation going?
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction is to say, no, he's not bad because he's Bobby Portis, because Bobby Portis has given us some good fantasy minutes, right? He's not just big Bobby P, crazy eyes.
Yeah, when people are out, though. It's last year, no Brook Lopez.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing, yeah.
That's the thing. So that's my gut reaction. But as you mentioned, man, Jay Crowder, they brought him in for a reason, right? Jay Crowder is in there. Chris Middleton, as you mentioned, is ramping up. So, no, I think Bobby Portis still plays a key role in this rotation, and he's still going to see right around that 20-minute mark. But, again, he's going to be one of those guys that is better for the Bucks in real life than he is for your fantasy team. So, no, I don't feel good about him for the rest of the season at all for the reasons that you alluded to.
I don't either. And as I've said plenty of times on this show, like at this time of the year, you got to make cuts. They won't always work out, right? So I'd like to look at these moves in this sort of frame of mind. Like if I drop Bobby Portis now and he gets back and plays 24 minutes a night in 2 weeks, how distraught will I be? What will he be? The 90th best player? The 80th best player? Do I actually care? Is that big of a deal? When everything here, coming off a knee injury, the addition of Crowder, Ingles, Middleton, Giannis playing more games, all those guys there keeping him at 20 minutes, which one of those is more likely? Probably the 20 minutes. And then if it doesn't happen, it doesn't burn me. It doesn't kill me. I'm not missing out on a top 40 player here, I don't think. Of course, weird stuff can happen. Knock on wood, like Giannis and Brook Lopez go down for the rest of the season tomorrow, and then he's going to play huge minutes. But, you can't play that game with every player, otherwise you're going to have 30 blokes on your roster waiting for something to happen that's probably not going to happen. So the way things are looking, maybe it is an injury, but how cautious are they with Chris Middleton? They don't need to push Bobby Portis into 25 minutes a night as he returns from his knee injury. They can keep him at 21 for the rest of the season because they've got all the other bodies there to do that work. So long story short, I'm not sure he improves his value, and I don't think it matters if he does, and you do need to move on in the interim. EZ says, is Charles Bassey a must-roster player?
I think he's a very interesting player, and I think he's a luxury stash type of guy, but is he a must-roster player? If we're talking about just a standard 12-team league, I don't think he's a must-roster player. In deeper leagues, sure, but in 12-team leagues, I don't think so.
I think it's... I agree. When we say must roster, Zach, it means like if I came into your league and looked at your waiver wire, that I would go bug-eyed and say, what? Charles Bassey's there, please add him. And I don't think either of us would have that reaction to seeing him on the waiver wire. We wouldn't go, you guys crazy? Why is he sitting there? Right? We wouldn't have, if we went into a league right now, Zach, and we saw Mark Williams on the waiver wire, I go, what are you dickheads doing? Please, what's happening here? Please go and add him. What's going on? But the thing with Bassey is over the next 4 nights, they play 3 games. So there's a W potential there for him just in that schedule boost. He is a really strong stream on the nights that they play. He's definitely a 14-team league guy, but I wouldn't put him in the must roster. I'd have him over, say, Nick Richards in Charlotte as a backup center. The interesting question here is that we've established he's not must roster. He's absolutely... Again, the other test I have is if I came in to look at your 12-team roster, Zach, and he was sitting on it, I wouldn't go, are you all right? It's not like Andre Drummond sitting on your roster. I'd say, yeah, that's pretty smart to have Bassey there. That actually makes some sense. I get the schedule. It might work perfectly in your favor. The question is, would you rather have Charles Bassey, San Antonio Spurs, backup center, or would you rather have Onyeka Okongwu, Atlanta Hawks, backup center?
Ooh. That's a good question, actually. Honestly, at this point, give me Bassey. Seriously, give me Bassey.
I think I agree, but I don't know, because Okongwu has had some really big games. Now, we don't really know what Snyder's going to do, because last game, Okongwu got 5 fouls in 12 minutes, and Capella played 35 minutes. Now, Snyder would run Gobert huge minutes. He didn't like to run bigs together, so John Collins didn't get much playing time there. Is he just going to lean more into Capella over Okongwu? Okongwu, unless Capella was in foul trouble, just was like 19 every night, and was productive there. And Bassey's sort of the same. So now I think I'd probably marginally lean Okongwu because he has produced or he's proven it more. But I think it's a closer call than what people might think on the surface.
Yeah, and I don't think the minutes are not leaning Okongwu very heavily anymore. It's a few minute difference at this point, and Bassey has been more efficient with his minutes, which doesn't always correlate when somebody gets more minutes. But is there a potential for Bassey's role to increase moving forward compared to Okongwu's? And I think the answer to that is yes.
I think the answer to that is yes as well. JP Lawrence has a really good question, and I don't really know the answer, but I'm going to speculate on it. He says, do steals specialists like Delon Wright stop gambling when they get more minutes, like shot blockers who start trying to avoid foul trouble when they start? Because we've seen Delon the last 2 games. Zach, in his starts in place of Monte Morris, has not registered a single steal, yet he was getting about 4.5 steals per 100 possessions as a backup. And you see it a little bit with Alex Caruso as well. In Chicago, the steal rate is down. But then you have the opposite, I guess, with D'Anthony Melton, who sort of gets his steals whether he starts or not. So I think we could look at the Delon example and say, that makes a little bit of sense. I'm not sure that it does mean... I'm not sure it's about the player necessarily not gambling as much. It might be that if you are getting more minutes playing against starters, you're playing against better players, and there's less careless passing, perhaps. That's another way to look at it. So there are less steal opportunities, better dribblers, better ball control players. Like you're going up against trying to steal the ball on ball against Kyrie versus trying to steal it against Ryan Archijakano. Like, there's a big difference in that sort of a situation. So I think it could be a combination of those two things. That just transitions me, Zach, into talking about Delon Wright with Monte Morris week to week. You're adding Delon, I'm guessing?
Absolutely, man. And Monte Morris is actually somebody that came up earlier in the week when I was doing the NBC live stream with Matt Lawson. And I asked Matt, I said, please explain Monte Morris to me, why people are so high on Monte Morris. I don't understand why people are so into this guy.
No,
at this point,
he's nothing. Like, honestly.
Yeah.
There's no upside. A lot of people thought, man, getting away from Jokic, he's going to have this huge usage bump. I was like, no, he's not. Like, he's going to sit there as the 5th offensive option on this team, and he's not going to do anything. And that's basically been the way that he's been all season, which is frustrating. He should have been dropped by people long time ago. We'll get into another question in just a second. But before I do that, I've got to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. We love delicious treats, but we don't love loading up on fat or on calories. We love loading up on protein, and that's what Built Bar delivers. They are the delicious protein bar with 17 grams of protein, but like 130 calories in these bars. And the secret to their taste is it's covered in 100% real chocolate. Now, I've told you for years that you can just go straight to Built.com, load up your cart, get your Built Bars, and life's a rainbow. That's what happens when you click that buy button. Everything just turns into gold for your life. But now you can just do that at Walmart. You can walk in straight down to the pharmacy department, and there they are on a shelf, 4-bar boxes, coconut puff, cookies and cream, and double chocolate. But if you're at a Sam's Club, you can find the bigger boxes, the 13-bar boxes in the churro flavor or in the brownie batter flavor. So go to Built.com. Go to Sam's Club or go to Walmart, and you can find the best tasting protein bar ever. That is Built Bar. Built Bar is built different. Okay, I saw a question and now I have lost it, and I'm going to try and find it. Oh, here we go, from Tang Nguyen. Do you think history will repeat itself with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, or do you think playing for an All-NBA team for a bigger contract too big of a factor to shut him down? Tang, let me tell you, what do you mean by history repeating itself? Do you mean him getting an injury that means he can't play? Because that's what's happened the last 2 seasons. People have this narrative in their head that gets pushed by a lot of mainstream media people. Could he have maybe played through some of the injuries? Maybe. But 2 years ago when he had his plantar fascia issue, that injury lasted 4 months. Right? He didn't play through July for the Canadian Olympic team or national team. Last season, he had 2 ankle sprains that cost him significant time, and he came back in March and played through to about the 17th of March with that ankle sprain. So people just think the Thunder make up injuries for Shai and he just doesn't play. Sure, if they were in a situation, maybe it could be like Anthony Simons and you come back 4 weeks too early and re-injure your ankle straight away. He could have done that. That's possible. But this is not a situation where they have made up fake injuries for Shai. They happen at this time of the year, and they are more than happy to say, hey, just go and rehab this and get it right. I'm not disagreeing with that whatsoever. But it's like people claiming that they just fake shut down Lou Dort and decided to cut into his arm and fix his shoulder because, they were tanking, or this surgery for Kenrich Williams. They're just going to do a fake surgery on his wrist. This is not what happens. Is Shai's abdominal injury a concern? A little bit, yeah. I don't think that this mythical shutdown that people claim, or I get my frustration with the shutdown is every time someone's hurt, is this a shutdown? This is a shutdown. No, if a player's hurt, he won't play. Will they extend rehab time for a week or so? Maybe that's possible. But people just so tightly holding onto this Shai shutdown narrative that I don't know what good it does you to think this way or where this is going to go. So history repeat itself. Will he get injured again? Maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you on the shutdown narrative. A couple things. I mean, in the Western Conference, you look at where Oklahoma City is right now. They are, 10, 11. They're 13th seed right now. 2.5 games out of the play-in. They're only 4 games out of 6th. I mean, the Western Conference is so tight right now. I don't think Oklahoma City has incentive to shut him down at all because they are in contention to make the playoffs. I think what the bigger picture probably is that they know they're not a title contender this season. And if he's dealing with any sort of, whether it be minor or otherwise injury, what's the payoff for pushing him and continuing to play through that just to make the play-in tournament or maybe sneak in as a 6th seed and lose in the first round? They're looking ahead to next season when Chet Holmgren's healthy, when the team is going to be in much better position to compete a season later. So I don't think there's incentive to bring him back if he's dealing with some sort of minor injury. And it appears that's what's happening. So I don't think there's a shutdown risk. I think if he was fully healthy, they'd be making that playoff push. But in the situation that they're dealing in now, there's no reward.
I'll say this. I think that once we hit 23rd or 4th of March or whatever, that he might play half the games the rest of the season in that final 10 days, 2-week period. And I think that'll be the case for a lot of different players across a lot of different teams. Sure. That's just what happens. If there's a week left in the season and you cop a week-long injury, well, then you're shut down, aren't you? Because the season's over for you, and that might extend to 2 weeks. That could very easily happen to a lot of different players across a lot of different teams. Sebastian asks a question which a lot of people want to ask, and I'll answer this in my own way in a second. He says, what players might get opportunity down the final stretch? So it's a very broad question, Zach. If you've got any names off the top of your head, throw them out there, but I've got an overarching opinion on this just in general.
Yeah, not a ton of names coming to mind right now. I mean, we can talk about Isaiah Joe, obviously, with the SGA if people are really, feeling strongly about him. But yeah, not a ton of names that are coming to my mind right now. I'd like to hear what your thoughts on that one are.
Yeah, I think that you're looking here down the stretch. So you're saying what's going to happen in 3 weeks' time? And Sebastian, while we might be, okay at our jobs, we don't know. Nobody knows this. It's impossible to know. Last season, I couldn't have sat there on March the 1st and told you that Georgios Kalaitzakis is going to play 48 minutes a night on the 30th of March, or Xavier Simpson's going to be a top 40 per game player, or Olivier Sarr's going to have a run of top 20 numbers for 2 weeks and then get cut because he was playing too well. There's no way you can do that. So you can't go out onto the waiver wire and grab a bunch of guys and stash them waiting for this stuff to happen, because it is literally completely random. And that's why I tell everyone on this channel, end your playoffs the 19th of March, because general history would tell me that once we hit the 20th of March, random stuff starts to happen all over the place. Don't be shocked, and I'm not saying to pick this guy up or to watch it, but watch someone like Josh Minott have a 20-20 game with 3 steals. That could happen. Towards the end of the season, the Timberwolves are struggling or they're locked into their seed. Josh Minott comes in and puts up big numbers. Or you get some other random second. Maybe Dalen Terry has a 10-10-10 Raymond Felton triple-double for the Bulls as they rest some guys. This stuff happens. It will happen. It will happen in April for sure. But we have absolutely no way of knowing it. And stashing players waiting for this stuff to happen is, I think, a real negative play. The chances of it coming off are so small that you just got to be quick to react when it does happen. But there's just no way of pre-planning for a lot of this stuff. Like we could pre-plan and say, well, the Spurs are going to, are they going to stop playing Zach Collins, their young center who's played 10 games over the last 4 years or whatever it is, so they can play their other young center in Charles Bassey? Like we talked about that before, but there's no clear incentive for all this stuff to go down the way that we hope it does, so we can feel like we're 3 steps ahead. And in the end, you just end up stepping all over yourself and not providing that real value. You're just going to be quick to react when it happens, I think. Kev, what is your opinion on Ben Simmons? Do I think he goes to the bench permanently? Yeah, like he's on the bench now. Like he's not coming off the bench. That is not changing. If he even plays again this season, his knees, soreness, there is no chance, Zach, that he starts this season, is there?
No, Ben Simmons should be off your roster right now. If you're going into the fantasy playoffs, why are you rostering Ben Simmons?
Yep, exactly. All right, so a couple more questions here. Jules, 2 questions from you. With the emergence of Pacers Jalen Smith's minutes, do you think he's someone to keep an eye on? Thinking of whether to watch him or Charles Bassey. Smith's last 2 games have been really good, and the thing that I pay attention to a little bit there is Rick Carlisle really went out of his way to say, hey, Smith's had a really shit go of things this season. Yeah, whether that's his fault or not, I'll let you know. It is his fault. Smith's had a shit go of things this season, but I've been so impressed with the way he's fought back, and he goes out of his way to single him out. So he's taken the backup role over Daniel Tice the last 2 games and ahead of Isaiah Jackson and put up really good numbers. Now, is he going to be useful enough to be a guy for most fantasy leagues in those backup minutes? Probably not. But what we need to watch is the fact that he's in that backup role now, Zach. So if Miles Turner misses a game, then Jalen Smith becomes the stream option, not Isaiah Jackson, not Daniel Tice. So yes, we're absolutely watching him. He's not as good of a permanent player as what Charles Bassey is. So if they're both in 18-minute backup roles, I do prefer Bassey, but we definitely do need to watch Jalen Smith, who's stepped it up the last 2 games.
Absolutely, and I think that's the approach you take is you just figure out which guy is going to get the minutes. As you mentioned, if Miles Turner is going to be injured. And Jalen Smith, 6 blocks over his last 2 games. That's something.
Yeah, it is. GC says that these dudes spend 10 minutes on one question. We've been going for 25 minutes, so thanks for everyone listening to the 2.5 questions that we've answered over 25 minutes. Do you think Matisse Thybulle is a must roster now instead of a stream option? Yeah, he clearly is.
Yes.
Does it work for every team? I wouldn't rely upon his points and threes. They have been much better. But those steals and the blocks are of use to everybody. Not to everybody. There's someone in your league they are of use to. It might not make sense for you. The scoring is up, but we don't want to rely upon that, Zach, as something that's going to happen every game. But yeah, he shouldn't be sitting on really any waiver wire anywhere. J Sizzle 810. Let's bring it back to something we talked about earlier with Anthony Simons. Is he a drop in a 10-team league, 9 category, no injury reserve in 5th place currently? So I'm going to assume, Jay Sizzle, that you're still fighting for the playoffs. Obviously, the playoffs haven't started. You're 5th, so you're in danger of getting knocked out. I don't know if Simons is going to miss more time with this ankle injury. Is he good enough on limited minutes with the questionable tag, maybe doubtful tag, with Jeremy Grant and Damian Lillard playing in a 10-team league where you don't have IL, so there's only 130 guys rostered and you're battling for the playoffs? I think that's a drop. There's no point holding him to not make the playoffs. It might seem, man, why would I drop Anthony Simons? I don't know how long he's going to be out, but if you actually need production today or tomorrow, you got to do it, I think.
I do think you have to do it, but I also think being in 5th place contributes to that.
Yeah,
because if I'm the first place team and the 5th place team drops him, I'm scooping him up immediately.
This is one
that's without even a second thought.
Oh, this is why having a league with no IL is terrible, because what it does is it makes the top teams unbeatable. Because you're right, in 5th place, you can't afford, you need to get everything you can in right now. Whereas if I'm in 1st, if I drop to 2nd, who cares? It doesn't mean a single thing. If I drop to 3rd, oh well, as I stash a bloke who might be back in a week, who might put up a top 60 run. If you had IL slots, multiple of them, you just put Anthony Simons into your IL, and then it's a blow to you, but it doesn't also strengthen the better teams. So that is, again, clear indications. Many teams would have had to drop Kevin Durant if he had no IL. People would have had to do that. Yeah. And then I'm sitting in 1st. I'll take that. I'll take the 0. And if I limp into the playoffs in 4th spot with Kevin Durant on my team, I think I'll be okay. You should always have IL every single time. All it does is make the leagues uneven, and it makes the top teams better every single time. Thank you for giving me that example. Here's a good question, which I think we can answer a couple off the top of our head before we get out of here. Back Brunson. Which players do you think will get big draft discounts next season having frustrating seasons currently? I've got two names very clearly at the top of my head. Who do you think will be the big draft discount guys next season?
Ooh, you go first, man. Let me think about this one for a second.
All right, there are two names that come out, and this is based on things that I hear. LaMelo Ball is one of them. Never drafting him again. Okay, that's cool. He had ankle sprains and broke his ankle. Like, this stuff is the ankle sprains, you're sure, but like that would, if you had that idea, you would never have drafted Steph Curry again after his third year. Like, I'm never touching him. Never. He's useless. I'm not drafting him ever again. Right. So LaMelo Ball is going to fall probably into round 3 in a lot of different spots, I would suggest, or at least the back end of round 2. And there's very, very easy, significant chances of him being a top 12 player next season. So he's going to fall. The other one is Giannis. Because people, man, how many people have told him, I am never drafting Giannis again? What an absolute waste of a first-round pick. He's actually, if you look, Josh, he's actually the 120th ranked player this season. Yeah, which is clear bullshit because, again, a great indication of why, if you go by rankings in that manner, you will delude yourself and you will lose. So, Giannis, I had him as the number 2 overall player, and he hasn't lived up to number 2. I understand that. He is still like in a punt free throw situation, which you all knew if you drafted Giannis, you were punting free throws. He's still like the 10th best player or 9th best player. Yet he is going to fall significantly in drafts by a lot. He's not going to go top 5. He might not go first round. And Giannis in round 2, it's going to be such an OP situation. He's always going to miss games with this knee. We know that. But he is going to fall pretty significantly, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the big thing with Giannis is exactly what you mentioned is if you drafted him, there's no reason you should have drafted him without having that punt build in your mind because otherwise, value is significantly lower. And so while you were talking, just a couple other names that kind of rolled to the top of my mind. Karl Anthony Towns, I think, probably burned a lot of people this year. And I think a couple of the second-year guys, Scotty Barnes and Evan Mobley, I think people were probably a little frustrated with this season. Starting to come around overall, but I think for the most part, there were just so much hype around them at the beginning of the season that they got clearly overdrafted, and I think people will overcorrect next season.
Oh, you can put you put Cade and Jalen Green in that as well. Like those guys will drop way down. Mobley's been the best of those guys, and he's coming on pretty strong here towards the end of the season. One more question, because a lot of people are asking it. Apparently, Dennis Smith Jr. or Trey Jones the rest of the season. Trey Jones is back today. I feel more confident in Dennis Smith, but it really just depends on the way your team is, because Smith is going to have some bad shooting, but he's going to get big steals, solid assists, and good blocks, whereas Jones is going to be sort of up and down assist player. Jones is almost like Zach, a guy we referenced earlier, Monte Morris. Like he's all right, but is there any big upside here? Not really. So I think, look, in a 12-team league, I can see both of them being rostered. I can see both of them being on the waiver wire. It's not make or break to have this guy over this guy in this particular situation. Look at schedule. Look at what the player brings to your team specifically. But both of them are 12-team league options. Both of them are fine on the wire. They are, if you have them, they're probably your worst player, which means don't fret about it too much. But I'd probably lean Smith with a little bit more consistency here than Jones.
Yeah, I lean Smith here as well. And just I'm sure if you're playing in a very competitive league, he's not available, but Kelly Oubre is available in 20% of Yahoo leagues right now. I really think it's worth looking at your waiver wire and seeing, is he there? Because he is clearly the biggest beneficiary of LaMelo Ball going down.
Yes. Is he a worse player to watch than Dylan Brooks?
He definitely doesn't have the same fashion sense, man. I'm not sure if you saw the Stone Cold Steve Austin fit from the other night. But.
I did, and then he went out and shot 1 of 9 in the first quarter or something. I did. So someone said that he was Stone Cold Steve Austin 3 of 16, which was very, very, very humorous to me. Oubre he's going to get. I said this yesterday on the show. Like the fact that Steve Clifford's like, all right, everyone, just clear out and let Kelly Oubre take every shot in the world. And that's been his coaching strategy the entirety of the season. Is crazy. I thought that Steve Clifford would hate Kelly Oubre, a bloke who never passes, doesn't play defense. I thought that Clifford would hate him, but he's gone the complete opposite and go, all right, Kelly, can you just run everything? And everything runs through you. I don't understand it for a single second, but it's what's happened all season. And it's annoying. And I can't stand watching him. As much as cool as Kelly Oubre is, I hate watching him play. And I reckon, Zach, that'll do it for us in this show, which was a good one. So thank you. appreciate you coming on. Zach, tell people what's going on with your NBC Sports Edge mailbags and everything that you got going on over there.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, man. It's always a pleasure. You can find me on Twitter at Zach the Monster. And as Josh mentioned, I'm doing a weekly mailbag show over at NBC Sports Edge on Tuesdays. I've had a lot of great guests on, yourself included. So that will continue rest of season. And we're just continuing to pump out the player notes and the pickup columns. So go over and check that out.
Go check that out. And of course, guys, follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. Zach, sorry, I didn't even say goodbye. I'll see you later, and thank you again for coming on.
Appreciate you, man. Take care.
Guys, subscribe, comments, all that stuff. I'm discombobulated. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.